Welcome to AK Podcast, where we typically explore science and nutrition behind livestock care and management with the best of the brightest in the business. I'm your host, Chris Radke, part of the sales and marketing team here at Agri-King. And with me today, as usual, is the Director of Field Services and a member of the sales management team, Mr. Mike Donaldson. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Very well, Chris. How's everything going in your world?
Well, we're pretty good. We are pretty good. It's a lovely day outside. I'm excited about our topic today. So, Mike, who are we talking with, and what are we talking about?
Well, today we have a change of pace. Everything you said in your introduction, we're going to blow right out the door here. It's not going to be an purely ag topic today. It seems in business and private life, one of the most common topics that cycles through is the importance of setting goals, how to set good goals, and more importantly, how to achieve them. I'm fortunate to work regularly with today's guest, and recently we were talking about goals for his Agri-King region. He opened my eyes to some intriguing, new to me thoughts about goals. He was kind enough to give a short presentation at our most recent Agri-King Development Group meeting. At that meeting, Chris, you got to experience these thoughts. Afterwards, Chris asked me what I thought about having this man on the podcast, and here we are. So if this doesn't go well, it is all on Chris Radke. Shawn and I are completely innocent of anything.
I'll take it.
With that kind of long and disjointed introduction, please join me in welcoming the Agri-King Regional Manager for our Michigan region, Shawn Mennenga. Shawn, please give us a little about your background.
I took a different path to Agri-King and agriculture. I had a previous career that for about 30 years I was a football coach. When I graduated college, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, and thought I was going to be a physical therapist, and was taking class at the University of Iowa and was working part-time and coached some high school football in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And over the course of time, I decided that I like coaching football a lot more than I like trying to get into physical therapy school. So, the running joke is my wife always thought she's going to marry a physical therapist. And in the meantime, she married a football coach that lasted about 30 years. I coached basically at every level, from high school, junior college, NAIA, Division II, FCS, Division I, FBS, and in the NFL for 9 years. So that career lasted about 30 years, and I decided to make a career change after, I think we counted it up, about 16 moves in a little over 30 years, and this is the 11th state we've lived in. So our kids are graduated out of the house now and stuff, but decided it was time to, I guess, have a little more firm roots than what we've had in the past. And the opportunity opened up at Agri-King here in Michigan, and our daughter was living in Ohio at the time. We just thought this would be a great move for us, and it's been great so far.
Well, it's certainly you've been a very welcome addition to Agri-King, Shawn. And for those of you who wonder, yes, he has amazing stories about coaching at those different levels. I sometimes try not to ask those kind of fanboy questions about what was it like in such and such a city and such a team. But if you ever meet Shawn, he's very willing to share. So, but the purpose we're here today, start us down the path of how you've learned to look at goals, Shawn, everything from setting them and achieving them, but especially the approach you take almost from a day-to-day basis.
I think, as I mentioned before, I think when we set goals, everyone sets goals, but I think in order to set the goals the right way, you always talk about setting, there's all kinds of goals that people talk about. The one I've kind of latched onto is SMART goals, where the acronym is, the S is for specific, the M is for measurable, the A is for attainable, R is for relevant, and T is for time bound. So if you set those specific things and know what you're trying to achieve, to me, that's really just the starting point, though, to where you're trying to get to. I mean, the end goal may be for example, as I talked about in the development group was, if I'm trying to drive across the country, the end goal, if I'm starting in New York City and driving to arrive in San Francisco, that's the end goal. But there's a lot of steps along the way that I think are really more important to get you there than just focusing on the end goal. And I think sometimes people start with this big grandiose end goal that they want to get to and don't really know how they want to get there. So, as I talked about in the development group, I think there's several factors that can keep you from getting to your end goal. And, one of those is external factors. And there can be all kinds of external factors, from the economy to your finances to facilities, climate, weather, your geography, where you live at. There's all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, you have no control over those things. So again, we take that out. I think the other two factors that can keep people from achieving their end goal or having long-term success is their mindset is an important one. And I think within that mindset, it's your perception of how you perceive things, and also, your ego can get in the way. We all have egos. We all have different perceptions. One of the things I showed in the group was, different pictures in psychology. You'll see those where it could be one of two things or several different things, and half the group would see the picture the one way, the other half of the group might see the picture the different way. But it's your perception. Nothing's right or nothing's wrong. It's just how you perceive it. So I think that's another factor. And then the other thing is not having those daily habits, those small daily habits, and the small plans to help you achieve the end goal. I think really can stop people. So, I think setting the right goals and then, but more importantly, working your way back from that end goal up to how you want to achieve it, and setting up small steps and small road markers along the way to help measure whether you're getting there or not.
Well, I think the thing that really caught my attention, and at your recommendation, I did read the book Atomic Goals, and that probably was the biggest departure for me. I think I did some of those things sort of naturally, but understanding how that approach is a much more effective way to achieve your big goal, to get across the country. And I know you were pretty open about the impact of that book specifically on how you put this together. So can you give our audience a little bit of insight into that book?
Yeah, Atomic Habits is a book that I've read, and it's by James Clear. It's been a New York bestseller that I think it's basically small changes and small improvements. A 1%, improving 1% each day can lead to the compound effect over time. You're gonna have marked improvements, and I think creating those small systems and habits on a daily basis to help you achieve the end game is going to be more important than just focusing completely on that goal. Because again, goals are, at the end of the day, a goal's out in the future and you have no control of the future. All you have control over is what the here and now. One thing we talked about in coaching all the time, you have control over your focus, your attitude, and your effort is really the things you have control over at the moment, and then in that moment today. So what are you going to do today that's going to help lead to, helping achieve that goal down the road?
So can you give us maybe one or two examples, maybe one outside of ag? It could be the driving across the country or something you worked on with a team, and then maybe an example in ag of how you would take that big goal and break it down into something smaller.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to, for example, football, everybody wants to win the Super Bowl, but at the end of the day, you've got to then work backwards of the playoffs, the regular season, all the way back to uh, training camp and on into mini camp and things like that, and plan backwards. And then what are you going to do on Monday through Friday of mini camp? How's your structure going to be? Your meeting schedule, your your lifting schedule, your practice schedule, and then it becomes focusing on setting a goal for minicamp. What do you want to get achieved on offense, defense, special teams for minicamp? What do you want to have, your first 7 installs done for each phase, and your guys have shown marked improvement on that and a great understanding of that. And again, setting a SMART goal to be able to measure those things, not worrying about at the end of the day, you want to make the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. You can't control those things because they're in the future. All you can control is today on Monday, exactly what I have to do today. And that, again, it's focused on the here and now. Even within that day, if I'm going to be, I have a lifting session, I'm going to go ahead and I'm focused on exactly what I have to do using the proper technique, giving the maximum effort I can to help improve my body at that moment, because that's the only thing I can control at that point. And then when I move on to going into meetings, having the right, your iPad and your notes and ready to go, and you have the right focus, and you're paying attention to what's being said, and you're absorbing those things and taking good notes, because those are things you can control in the moment. From an ag related sense, I mean, if I'm again, I'm getting ready to plant crops, looking back, I know that harvest is going to be, weather permitting, sometime in the fall, at the end of September, beginning of October through mid-October, weather depending, but then working my way back, knowing what I have to try to achieve, as far as, uh, again, when I want to, harvest, but working my way back to, all the way back to getting the equipment ready, to doing my soil tests to know exactly, the fertilizer. At what point do I need to fertilize? What am I going to use to fertilize? What crops am I going to plant on certain fields as I rotate them out? When do I need to plant those? And working my way back to have the equipment and have my crews ready to go, understanding what they need to do. And then from there, it's setting those daily standards of what needs to be done on today, on Monday. This is what we're focused on within that. We're getting the equipment ready. We're getting ready to plant. This set of crews is being organized to then go in and be ready to do their jobs and know exactly what they have to do and have a clear understanding what's done, and then have them focused on that moment in that day to do the very best that they can.
So, and it could be either if I was a player or if I'm a farmer, what role do, I guess I'm going to go with the player side. What role does a coach play in helping me make that daily goal? I mean, I'm assuming there's some of this that involves me just deciding to get up in time in the morning. I mean, there's things that are my responsibility, but there's got to be a role that coaches, trusted advisors play in helping someone formulate either that, the training camp goals or the planting goals. How does that come together?
Yeah, I think everybody has the ability to coach. I mean, coaching is teaching, and leading. Coaching is helping lead, and I think it's helping people understand the here's what needs to be done, but also the why of why this needs to be done, and then the how, the best ways to get it done, so that they understand that my role is important in this, and this is why I'm doing this. I think too many times people, you know, just tell people what to do, and then they don't explain the how and the why, and there gets to be some confusion along the way. And I don't think that leads to the best attitudes. If you can make it help people to understand this is why they're doing that, this is how to do it the best way, and then help them decide to be able to do that. I think that you get more buy-in, and you get, it leads to better effort, better learning, and hopefully at the end, better results.
What uh what role does dealing with either temporary or long-term failure play into how you uh, work through that? I mean, it's talk about, you know, the things maybe you couldn't control that kept you from even making a team, I guess, back in your football days, or the drought that wipes out your crop regardless of how much you did. How does the focusing on the small things help someone deal with that kind of setback?
Yeah, I think the other part I haven't talked about is those small daily habits, the atomic habits, but it's also, I'm a big believer in what I call neutral thinking, where it's objective, present thinking, taking the emotions out of it and deciding, here's what happened, here's why it happened, and what are the next steps that need to be done. And there's going to be failures along the way. There's going to be successes along the way. But if I could take as much of my, without being, you're not a machine, you're still passionate about things and all those things, and you're still, um, you still work as hard as you can. But at the end of the day, if I can take as much of the emotion and make it as objective as possible, then I can figure out this is why I failed. Um, you know, it was the Olympics and the swimmer and there was a shoulder strain. So at the end of the day, they're not going to be able to swim their very best times. Or at the last second, somebody got sick, that it was some factor that was out of their control happened, and it wasn't meant that they failed in the moment. They're not a failure because of that. It was a failure in the moment, or they didn't achieve what they wanted to achieve. But then how are they able to move on from that? And I think being neutral thinking helps, I think, overcome those things. It's not overly positive, and you set yourself up for potentially not being able to achieve something. And you definitely don't want to be a negative thinker, because you give yourself no chance. But if you can objectively look at it, take as much of the emotion out of it, and then decide, hey, this is why this happened. These are the adjustments we need to make. And then you move on, and you, again, use those small daily habits that you've built up to then help move forward after that.
When you were helping me with the specific book we were working on was Atomic Habits, and it was about the time during the football playoffs that one of the players on the Philadelphia Eagles got a whole new level of fame because on the bench she was reading Inner Excellence. And you mentioned that was another one of these books that you've really used to put your philosophy together. And I think that was the one that you're talking about now, isn't it, from Inner Excellence?
Yeah, Inner Excellence has a lot of those concepts. The other couple books where I'm talking specifically about the neutral thinking, that it's giving a name to it. I mean,
Okay.
in Inner Excellence, he's in a roundabout way, it's the same concepts. But there's a mental coach named Trevor Mowad that worked with several. Started off in tennis, and then started working with the Jaguars, and then worked his way through and worked with Russell Wilson and several different NFL teams, and Alabama when they were winning national championships, and Georgia, and several of Nick Saban's disciples have used him in different teams. Florida State with Jimbo Fisher when they won a national championship. He was really focused again on it's basically in football and in sports, it's the next play mentality, where you can objectively look at, here's what just happened. It's in the past. I can learn from it, but I'm not going to dwell on it because I can't control that. And I have no control over the next play in the future. Moving forward, all I control is the next play right now in this moment, and staying focused on that. And I think that's what people can get off track a lot of times, is they either look in the past too long and they start losing confidence, and they dwell on things, or they're too worried about the future and they have no control over that, and they lose track of what's today in the present that they can control, and they don't end up, they set themselves up for failure moving forward because they're not doing the things right now to help them be more successful.
What do you think leads to ideas like this? Either people being willfully blind to them, choosing not to put in the work to do these things. It seems a very logical and simple process, but books on goal setting, this whole concept seems evergreen. It's like it never ends. There's always another version. There's always another discussion. I guess at some level, should this be a course in school somewhere that's not being taught? What is it that leads to so many adults coming to these ideas, and it's almost like, I just discovered water. This is really cool stuff. And instead
Yeah.
it's ideas that you feel like 8 and 10-year-olds ought to be introduced to, and instead
Yeah.
it's older people.
Yeah, I think we get so caught up with just the minutia of our life, you know what I mean? That just, we're so worried and get tied up in what we want to get done. And again, we can't control the things we're talking about today. It does seem very basic, but at the end of the day, we're talking about our mind, and that's our most powerful tool in this world is our minds. And if we could train our minds to have the right perception and self mastery and humble ourselves and put our ego aside as much as possible and again try to focus. There needs to be a step back and we need to plan for the future and what we're trying to get, what we want to achieve, learn from our past and the mistakes we made to help not make the same mistake twice. But then it becomes the mindset of focusing again on today and creating those small daily habits that are going to compound over time that you may not think's making a difference, but 2 weeks from now, you continue to develop these small daily habits and then it becomes easier and easier and easier. It becomes just part of your ingrained in you and you don't really think about it anymore. And you're better because of it when you look back and you don't necessarily see those improvements you make. It's the weight loss industry. I mean, the yo-yo dieting where, you take people take the quick fix and they lose 50 pounds, but they didn't create those small daily habits. They did it by taking supplements or they did some crazy diet and they hit their goal. And then all of a sudden they haven't created those small daily habits of actually living a better, healthy life by exercising daily, by eating healthier, eating smaller portion sizes. And then, they get off of that and then there's nothing, they have no basis anymore. And then they they end up gaining the 50 pounds back quicker and end up gaining another 25 on top of that. It's why there's a whole industry. Again, because we haven't trained our minds and our habits the right way.
And now I will go specifically to when you were coaching, because if you were in college, you had 4 or 5 years with an individual and then it was somebody else and repeat, repeat, repeat. And even with an NFL team, yes, there's people that play 10 years with one team and there's people that don't play a whole season with that team. What percent, and maybe it changes the higher level of achievement they're at, what percent of people did you see excelling because of this? And how many were failing because they didn't get it? They didn't understand these pieces.
I'll use a couple specific examples. We had a guy named Johnson Batamosi in Cleveland that not a lot of people had heard of. He was an undrafted free agent out of Stanford, extremely bright, very, very, he could run, he could jump. He's for a corner. He was 6'1", 203 to 5 pounds. He had good size. He just didn't always, sometimes football concepts didn't come to him as far as the defense, but as far as on special teams, where it was more straight line, see ball, get ball, there was a smaller focus on what he needed to do. He became a Pro Bowl type player at that, and he took extremely great notes. I sat next to him for 4 years and helped maybe kind of make it where he understood a little bit better, but he would fill up notebook after notebook throughout the season. And he had a daily habit of studying film. Even when he went out, he had a certain warm-up routine that I always knew he was going to be out if practice started at a certain time, he would be out there 35 minutes before time or 45 minutes before time doing his warm-up and his stretching routine. And you could count on that. You could take that to the bank every single day. That was going to get done. In pregame, he went out at a certain time and he had a certain things that he did to get his mind prepared and to get his body prepared. And then he went and performed at an extremely high level. He ended up playing 9 to 10 years in the league, and at one point was the highest special teams player, position player in the league. After he left us, in our infinite wisdom in Cleveland, we let him go, and he ended up going to Detroit and was the highest paid special teams player. Tramon Williams would be another great example in Green Bay for the Packer fans out there. Tramon was a walk-on in college, which means he didn't get a scholarship coming out at Louisiana Tech, ended up earning a scholarship, became a great player for them, went undrafted, and I forget the number of corners that were taken above him or were drafted ahead of him on his draft year. But he ended up, was in Houston, got cut in Houston, went to Green Bay, was on the practice squad for a year, but he had the right habits, knew how to study. He's what we call a great, he was a pro's pro as far as getting his mind and his body ready and staying healthy. Led him to basically a 16-year NFL career, and he made about $64 million over his career because he did things the right way. The truly great ones that last and are successful over time have those small daily habits, and they know what works for them, and they continue to improve and take care of their mind and their body to achieve great things. The percentage that technically get drafted ahead or run faster 40s or are bigger, stronger, faster, that you would think this guy should be a great pro. I mean, there was a lot of them. Unfortunately, in Cleveland, way too many. But that we thought were going to be, or the front office thought was going to be great players that didn't have those small daily habits, and their life was essentially a wreck off the field, which then affected them on the field because they didn't prepare their mind and bodies, and they end up washing out after a couple years because they didn't live up to their potential. So to put a percentage, I wouldn't be able to put that on there, but I saw guys that you could tell that they had the right mental makeup and the right daily habits. And then they continued. Those were the guys that were asking the pros, the smart rookies. We would always talk about those young players. We would always talk to them about, hey, go find the Joe Thomases of the world that are first team all pro that have played 10 years in the league. Go find the Tremont Williams and find out what they do. Ask them what they do on a daily basis to prepare their mind and their body, and then figure out what works for you to develop your own routine and take a blend of all the things you see from these successful older vets and then blend that into your own routine. And the guys who did that end up playing a long time, maximize their abilities, and the ones who didn't, that thought they knew it and didn't, washed out very quickly.
So that sets me up perfectly. It's almost like we planned this, so we don't plan anything. So, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this this podcast when we're into the time of year, people are going to be, getting crops in the ground, going to harvest. I hope some of our audience is, killing time in a tractor cab, listening to some of these things. It might give them some time to think a little bit. If someone's intrigued by what you're telling, what would be some of the, and I think one of the unique things is you can read as many books as you want, and then you put together your piece that comes from here, and that becomes how you go forward. And there's nothing wrong with us being pieces of different things. So if somebody really wants to dive into this and they decide today's the day, I want to begin putting together a daily plan, repeat some of the books you've talked about, and what would you tell if I decided that I'm going to get more serious about losing weight? Like you said, that's a very common one, or anything, but I want to start making that change. What are some of the very first steps that you would guide me into?
I think you talked about books. I would say the 3 to 4 books I would recommend that I've gravitated to, that I think that the first couple would be, as far as your mindset and training your mind and those kind of things, would be Inner Excellence by Jim Murphy. And then a book called It Takes What It Takes by Trevor Mowad. And then he kind of expanded on that in a later book called Getting to Neutral by Trevor Mowad. So again, those are things that are dealing with your mind. They talk about goals and habits and a little bit. And then the last one to kind of culminate with would be the Atomic Habits by James Clear, that kind of then he takes some of the concepts of your mind and how you think about goals, but then he breaks those into very specific training methods on how to create small habits and sometimes more importantly, how to eliminate bad habits. And I think sometimes we talk about adding things and I need to do more and I need to do this, where in essence, there's only 24 hours in the day and there's only 7 days a week. It's how we decide to use them. And so I think eliminating several things out of our life are just as important as trying to add more things into it. So I think those would be the books. I think that, again, to me, there's not very many original ideas. We always joked in football that, somebody thinks they're the new age guru and running this concept, and there's some 75-year-old former coach sitting back watching, shaking his head going, we ran that back in 1952. It's just a little different. The formation might be slightly different, but it's still the same concept. I mean, there's only so many things. I think sometimes we try to make things way too hard. And whether it's football, whether it's farming, whether it's whatever industry we're in, people want to seem like they're the gurus, where if we just handle the fundamentals of this is the most important things in our job, and then trying to figure out ways to perform those at a very high level by creating those small daily habits, I think lead to a lot better and more sustained success and higher achievement over a longer period of time. And I think sometimes it's the joy of monotony. I think Kobe Bryant talked about, it's the joy of monotony of him going out, and when the game's over with, no matter what time that game got over with, he was going to lift weights and take care of his body in the hot tub and do his routine. And then, in the off season, it was taking X number of thousand jumpers from these things. It's getting up every day to do those things. And in farming, it's figuring out what works for your farm and empowering the people that you work with and teaching them the fundamentals to do their job at a higher level, and then entrusting them to do those jobs while still holding them accountable, that I think are going to lead to sometimes I think we get wrapped up, especially I know in our industry, of, hey, a little more methionine. If I put 0.05 more grams of methionine in, I'm going to bump the butter fat up. Where in essence, if you just make sure your TMR is what's on the paper is getting mixed in the TMR mixer, which is then getting fed to the cows, is going to be way more important than that 0.05 grams of methionine.
That's beautiful. Any other wrap-up thoughts on this topic, Shawn?
I probably talked way too long as I'm looking here, and
it's beautiful.
30-some minutes, and I'm like, it felt like it was 5 minutes. So I don't have anything more if you guys don't.
Well, I really appreciate you doing this, and I think it does. I think this is really an interesting topic that more people need to spend some time on. I will go ahead and give Chris a big thumbs up. Good job. This went very well. You tell me any topics you think would be good, Chris. But I also will ask you our traditional, what did you learn today, Chris?
Well, my big takeaway is that Shawn's idea of neutral thinking. And I thought of Thomas Edison's quote of, it didn't take me 10,000 times to fail. It was something like that. It was 10,000 times to figure out it didn't work. And it's just this idea of taking, even though the world will tell you it's a failure, taking it and looking at it differently. Shawn, I have a follow-up question. How would you tell somebody to remind them to stay focused on their goals? Do you put up pictures, or do you I don't know, what do you do to stay focused on those goals?
Yeah, I mean, we've had, to me, it's going back and revisiting them. I mean, I know some people put them up in their bathroom window or in their car, you know what I mean, when they down by the gear shift and things like that. I mean, there are those things, I think, that so you see them. I think those are key. I would recommend those and stuff. I mean, but I think it's taking time as part of your small daily habits to evaluate where you're at. You know what I mean? At the end of the week, I think sometimes we get so focused on what's happening that we do need to take a step back and evaluate, hey, where are we at? I mean, on that road trip of life across we're trying to get to, there may be a snowstorm coming and we've got to divert, and instead of being on I-80, we're going to go south to I-70. Didn't plan on that, but that's an adjustment I need to make, or there's road construction for the next 75 miles. I need to get off the main path I didn't plan on. But at the end of the day, it's going to be what's needed and what's necessary right now to continue to move forward.
Yeah, kind of take a value of where you are at all times. That's good. That's good. All right. If you like what you heard, even though it was out of our typical norm, hit us up on any of our socials. You can find us on our website, Agri-King.com. And if you have any questions or follow-up thoughts, you can email us at podcasts@Agri-King.com. Shawn and Mike, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much, Shawn. And thank you as always, Chris. Great job hosting.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.